Welcome. The integrity of a person's reputation is a cornerstone of civil society. In this explainer, we will conduct a methodical analysis of the tort of defamation. We shall explore how Indian law protects individuals from false and damaging statements, examining the statutory framework of the Indian Penal Code 1860 and the precedential principles established by landmark case law. To navigate this complex area of law, our analysis is structured into 6 distinct modules. We will commence with an introduction to defamation, proceed to its types, libel and slander, examine its essentials in the concept of innuendo, distinguish defamation from insult, review the available defenses, and conclude with a comprehensive revision. Let us begin our examination with the fundamental principles and statutory definition of defamation. At its core, defamation is an injury to the reputation of a person. The classic definition provided by Winfield is the publication of a statement which tends to lower a person in the estimation of right-thinking members of society generally. In India, the law is codified in Section 499 of the Indian Penal Code 1860, which defines the offense. The corresponding punishment is prescribed under Section 500 of the Code. The essential test is whether the statement causes the person to be shunned or avoided. Having established the definition of defamation, we will now explore its 2 primary classifications, libel and slander. The distinction between libel and slander is based on the form of the publication. Libel is defamation in a permanent form, such as writing, printing, or an effigy. It is addressed to the eye. Slander is defamation in a transient form, such as spoken words or gestures. It is addressed to the ear. While English law differentiates their actionability, Indian law makes no such distinction. Under the Indian Penal Code, both libel and slander are criminal offenses, and for civil claims, both are actionable per se, meaning without the need to prove special damages. A fascinating legal question arose in the age of cinema in the case of Yusupov versus Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer Pictures Limited, 1934, 50 TLR 581 CA. A Russian princess sued the film studio, alleging a character in a film defamed her. The legal issue was whether a talking film constituted permanent libel or transient slander. The court ruled that the speech in a film is an inseparable part of a permanent record intended for exhibition. Therefore, the entire film, including its synchronized speech, constitutes libel. To successfully establish a claim of defamation, certain legal requirements must be met. We shall now examine these essential elements and the related legal concept of innuendo. For a defamation claim to succeed, the plaintiff must prove 3 essential elements. First, the statement must be defamatory in nature, meaning it must tend to injure the reputation of the plaintiff. Second, the statement must refer to the plaintiff. It is not necessary for the plaintiff to be named if they are reasonably identifiable by others. Third, the statement must be published. In law, publication means the communication of the defamatory matter to at least one person other than the plaintiff. A notable exception is that communication between a husband and wife is privileged and does not constitute publication. Let us now apply these principles to a classic legal problem. A newspaper publishes a story about a fictitious character named Artemis Jones. A real barrister named Artemis Jones, whom the author and publisher did not know, sues for libel. Is the newspaper liable? The answer, established in the landmark case of Halton and Company versus Jones, 1910 AC 20, is yes. The court held that liability for libel does not depend on the intention of the defamer, but on the fact of defamation. The relevant test is objective. Would reasonable persons acquainted with the plaintiff understand the publication as referring to him? If so, liability is established, irrespective of the author's innocent intent. The law prioritizes the protection of reputation over the publisher's state of mind. We now address the legal doctrine of innuendo. This applies where words appear innocent in their ordinary meaning, but contain a secondary defamatory meaning known to a section of people who are aware of special extrinsic facts. In such cases, the plaintiff bears the burden of pleading and proving this latent defamatory meaning. The quintessential example of innuendo is the case of Cassidy versus Daily Mirror Newspapers Limited, 1929, 2KB 231. A newspaper published a photograph of a man with a woman announcing their engagement. The man was, in fact, already married. His wife, the plaintiff, sued for libel. She argued that to her acquaintances, the announcement implied she was not his lawful wife and was cohabiting immorally. The court agreed, ruling that the newspaper was liable for the defamatory innuendo, as the statement carried a hidden meaning that was damaging to those aware of the extrinsic fact of her marriage. It is crucial to distinguish the tort of defamation from the criminal offense of insult.
This section will delineate the key legal differences between them.
The key distinction lies in the intended harm and the audience. Defamation is concerned with injury to reputation in the eyes of others. Therefore, publication to a third party is an essential element. An insult, primarily governed by Section 504 of the Indian Penal Code, is concerned with an intentional provocation intended to cause a breach of the public peace. For an insult, publication to a third party is not required. The offense is complete when communicated directly to the victim with the requisite intent.
Consider the following scenario for analysis. Mr. A enters Mr. B's office and, with no one else present, calls Mr. B a fraud and a liar. Mr. B subsequently files a suit for the tort of defamation. Will his suit succeed?
The answer is no. The suit for defamation will fail. A core essential of defamation, publication to a third party, is absent. The defamatory words were communicated only to the plaintiff, Mr. B. However, this does not mean Mr. A is without liability. He may be prosecuted for the offense of criminal insult under Section 504 of the Indian Penal Code, as his words were intended to insult and thereby provoke a breach of the peace.
We now turn to a critical aspect of defamation law, the defenses available to a defendant, which, if proven, may negate liability even if the statement is defamatory. The law recognizes several defenses. The first is justification by truth. In a civil suit, proving the statement's truth is a complete defense. For criminal defamation under Section 499 IPC, the truth must also be published for the public good. Second is fair comment on a matter of public interest. Third is the rolled-up plea, a technical defense combining truth and fair comment. Fourth is privilege, which can be absolute or qualified. Finally, the defenses of consent and apology may also be available. Privilege is bifurcated into two types. Absolute privilege provides complete immunity from a defamation suit, even if the statement was made with malice. It applies to specific occasions, such as statements made in parliamentary or judicial proceedings. Qualified privilege protects statements made in the performance of a legal, social, or moral duty. However, this defense is defeated if the plaintiff can prove that the defendant was acting with malice. Let us examine the application of privilege with this specific hypothetical. A member of the state legislature, during a speech on the floor of the assembly, calls a private citizen a smuggler. Can the aggrieved citizen successfully sue the member for defamation? The answer is no. Under Article 194, Clause 2 of the Constitution of India, the speech is protected by absolute privilege. It is therefore completely immune from a defamation suit.
The defense of fair comment is not absolute. Its limits are illustrated in Marivelle v. Carson, 1887, 20 QB 275. A theater critic wrote a review of a play, but his commentary was based on a misrepresentation of the play's plot, falsely implying an adulterous situation. The court ruled that for a comment to be fair, it must be based on a true statement of facts. Since the critic's comments were founded on a factual falsehood, the defense of fair comment failed, and he was held liable for libel. To conclude, we will now consolidate the core principles and landmark cases discussed, providing a structured summary for examination purposes. For the purpose of revision, retain these key points. Defamation is an injury to reputation, as defined in Section 499 of the Indian Penal Code. Indian law does not distinguish between libel and slander. Both are actionable per se. Remember the key case rulings: Yusupov, which established that films constitute libel; Holton, which confirmed that intention is irrelevant; and Cassidy, which illustrated the doctrine of innuendo. The three essentials of defamation are a defamatory statement, reference to the plaintiff, and publication. The five primary defenses are justification by truth, fair comment, absolute and qualified privilege, consent, and apology. This concludes our academic explainer on the tort of defamation.